Right. Hi, Ty.
Hi, Aninha.
Thanks for joining me today to talk
Mhm.
about the world and all that we're facing and different ways to hold it, from the very concrete to perhaps more visionary. And I know you have a lot of wisdom there, so I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Well, a lot of words that we hope are going to be that are tapping into the font of wisdom. But yes, there are
Yes.
lots of words to come through.
Yeah, and just want to introduce you, one, as an ambassador of sorts, I'm sure in many ways in this world, and then in a concrete way, the creatively centered implementation team for the Bay Area School of Consciousness Medicine.
Hmm. That's
And
what I'm doing.
yeah,
Hmm.
so I just want to frame that I'm going to start basically by speaking from the chronology of our relationship, because a lot of, well, the reason I've asked you to talk is because over the years I think we've known each other, maybe, I don't know, 6, 7 years, 8, I
I
don't
think
know.
at least maybe 8 years now. I've been saying 8 years when I think about the event we were doing together, but
Okay.
yeah, something like
Yeah.
7 to 8 years. Yes.
Yeah. So there have been moments that kind of stood out outside of time, or just really stayed with me, things that you've said that felt like teaching moments.
Hmm.
And so I'm going to just name to start, to kind of give people an overview. Like, we met in Malidoma Some's training of indigenous IAST, Indigenous African Spiritual Technologies. And
I think was it shamanic or spiritual? Maybe it was spiritual.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah,
Hmm.
we've been in a Transforming Historical Harm project group together,
Hmm.
and now we're in Soul and Society together.
Hmm.
And also, we've had conversations where you've shared with me some deep dives into some understandings that feel new and interesting to me, that I'd love to for you to share as well. So,
Sure.
yeah.
I'm
Okay.
open to share what you and me and the ancestors decide is to come through here. Let's
Great.
go for it.
Okay. So, mm. So when I met you at Malidomas, there were a couple of things. Um, I'm just gonna take a breath here and feel into it. First of all, the moment I met you, I just had an immediate recognition of just a knowing, and the love was very immediate.
Hmm.
So that feels like it's kind of sustained all of where
Mm,
we're going, and feels present
hmm.
for me.
As well for me.
So I think the ancestors for me, like you just said, is a big piece, that we're not here doing this alone, that we don't have to figure this out ourselves, that there's support that's unseen and has been forgotten by many and is being remembered by many. So I
Hmm.
just wonder if there's anything you want to share about the role of the ancestors in this time period that we're in, and what we're facing as a culture, our country, and the world.
Mm. Well, the first thing that came up as you said that was, and what I've been learning so much over my past, my most recent work is around the asking, that the ancestors really can't do much until we recognize them and ask them for the help. And how I have that organized in my consciousness is that part of the contract that we came here is that we came here to do this. So this is so much about us being the ones that said, this is the project we want to do, this is the transformation project we want to do, this is the growth project we want to do. So a lot of that is like the ancestors are very much structured in the way that any guide or parent is sometimes, when the being has agency, that okay, we've now got to wait until you say, let help me with this before we step in and just do it for you. It's like the image I'm having is the toddler falling and the parent running immediately before the toddler just finds its way back up and starts walking again. That's the first thing that I'm feeling as you ask that question, or getting that as you ask that question, that we have to ask for help. And that's what I've been learning to do in my ancestor prayer. So I actually use a Sobonfu prayer every day. Um, ancestors, those that I know, those that I don't know, and those that know me more than I know myself,
Mm.
help me with. And then I move, that's how I move into my ancestor prayers, with her being one of the key people that I'm convening with there. Um,
Do you want to say anything about who Sobonfu is for people who don't know?
yeah, Sobonfu Some is the initial marriage partner of Malidoma Some, who we did the indigenous African spiritual or shamanic uh, technologies with. And they ended up going their separate ways by the time I and you came into Malidoma's life. But Sobonfu did a great deal of work in the world and in this country around grief. Uh, she took on the role of helping us mitigate all of the grief that is sitting here in our world, and in this society in particular. So I crossed paths with her initially at the Berkeley's Chaplaincy Institute, and where I was considering becoming a chaplain at that time. And that's where I first met her. And then I ended up going to a grief ritual with her at Spirit Rock, and just felt such a connection with her as well. I had worked with Malidoma by then, but or we had worked with Malidoma by then, but she came into my life that way. So she's also a scholar,
Mhm.
uh, medicine woman, was all of these things, um, and a guide for those of us doing this work of healing the wound of Western civilization, which is how I hold what Malidoma was imparting to us. She was the female embodiment of what the ancestors sent us to heal this wound that is Western civilization.
That's a very broad and grounding way to hold it. When you say that, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I'm just remembering when we were at one of, I think it was the first ritual, we went through water and earth and fire and mineral rituals,
Mhm.
nature rituals. I think it may have been the first, it was a water ritual, and we were by a waterfall. And there
Mhm.
was this young white man who was steeped in Yoruban practices and was wearing his garb. And you and I don't think we'd ever had a conversation before. And I think I struck up one about appropriation and just remembered you being very generous, and
Mhm.
that you just kind of felt into him, and you felt comfortable with where he was sitting.
Mhm.
And so I was surprised.
Mhm.
And so I wondered if you wanted to say anything about appropriation and just how that lands in different ways, knowing that obviously I'm white. My ancestors, as you know, were part of enslaving people in Brazil, and yet we were sharing this African shamanic path. So anything you want to say about that?
Sure. I mean, it's so timely that you're even asking me this, because it's come up recently in the role that I have at the School of Consciousness Medicine with the young students that, and they're not all young, I guess, with the burgeoning healer students that are there, and they're mostly white embodied beings, or hold themselves identity wise as white. And this topic came up yet again, and I don't remember how generous, or as you say, I was generous when I spoke to the young man in the woods of Santa Cruz. But I guess I'm still generous in that way, because what I left with as they were grappling with this moniker of being white shaman, and how difficult that was for them to hold. Uh, and and what I ended up saying was, we're all holding the paradox here, that there it's yes, there is appropriation that's happening and has happened. And that is the way, once again, as I use that word, Western civilization, that is how Western civilization enacts. So there are none of us that are not appropriating, because we have been socialized in this culture. Um, and so we do take it as our manifest destiny to take on whatever we want to take on because that is how Western civilization works. And there is some grappling to do with that for each of us, no matter what body we are in. And as I was talking to those students, I said, we're also expanding to something that is beyond that. So we're living in both realities. The learning is happening in both ways. We are having to grapple with the appropriation, the racism, the misogyny, all of these things that are part of a patriarchal white supremacist system. We all are holding those pieces and have been socialized that way. And we are also spirits that are delving into something far beyond these constructs. And when we start talking about, at least in that school state, expanded states, or even what we were doing, which was also another, the rituals we were doing were taking us into an expanded state of being. That's something that also has to be honored as well, that that young white man in his Yoruban uh, accoutrement, he also is expanding to the best of his ability. He is handling this with as much respect as he knows how at this time. And I believe that's what I was sensing into. There, of course, there is this way that appropriation has been when we've taken up others' cultures and we haven't acknowledged that this comes from these people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in this moment speaking about the music of America and Black people, that most of us don't say. So much of this music came from the African people that we brought here and enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
So that form of appropriation is disturbing. But that man is saying, this belongs to this culture, and I respect this culture. I honor this culture. As far as I'm concerned, as I told those students a few weeks ago, if you are honoring and respecting, I'm fine. If
Mm.
you are showing, just like I do to Sobonfu every day, when I say my way of honoring the ancestors, I am honoring this. And if I can feel that in the being, I don't, it feels ridiculous for me to hold some righteous indignation around, this is not your culture. So when I hear that from so many people these days around this whole appropriation and whether we can say aho or whether we can say ashe, or, like what? Who are the police here? And how have you decided you are whoever is saying there, you can't do this? Who anointed you as police of everyone else? If you're saying to someone, I'm not hearing the honoring of that culture, that's one thing. But if you're just saying, I've decided based on who I am today that you cannot do this, that leaves me incredulous. And I don't hold that space.
Uh-huh.
Not to say that wounded people who have felt that someone has taken something from them will not respond that way.
Mm.
And I also need to have compassion for that. I just don't sit in that particular space around appropriation.
Yeah, that opens up a whole conversation I'm not sure I want to go down, but at least I'll name.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. Is It's such a confusing time because we're all trying to be as conscious as possible, or
Mm-hmm.
many of us.
Mm-hmm.
And this policing thing, which I very much relate to and have been shedding for the last couple of years against my against many parts of me, but it's actually very freeing to let it go. But as a white person, this cop thing, it's like feels like a role of trying to bring consciousness and awareness, right? So who appointed you? Well, a lot of people appointed me because people of color in particular, because they're asking white people, if you hear this, step up, say it, confront it. So it's what I've found is if we try to paint by numbers, it's just going to be hell. And it's really this process of deep, and I've explored this with you around appropriation, because I was looking for the numbers, right? Is it okay? Can I do this? Can I do that? And that place where we have to really listen deeply to where our own compass is, while taking in and learning from people that are having different experiences than ourselves. So I'm just hearing that you've stepped out of the paint by numbers and you're listening from some deeper place and looking for the baseline of, like you said, honoring, respect, Like, how is this person, what's the feeling here? How's this person holding it? Not that there
Mhm.
aren't blind spots, but it feels like you're bringing a lot of heart and yeah.
I am, yeah, I may be. And I'm also, there is also some judgment for me because I've also been wounded by those who've asked me to do certain things in a certain time frame that they want. And as we before we started the recording, it was up about the trans stuff and how I've been told to hold the personal pronoun piece. And some of that has been challenging for me, not because of honoring the reality, but because of how I've been told to honor the reality. So even in me, there you're hearing in that some reaction to how are you teaching me? Are
Mhm.
you teaching me with some sort of the iron rod that you've learned from the Christian ways of socialization? Or are you teaching me with some sort of tender compassion that says this this is a way that I feel that I can be seen finally or heard finally? It's just this is something that I'm asking for you to try on. But
Mhm.
that's not how we teach in this culture. We teach from a place of authority
Mhm.
often. So if I'm hearing someone speak to me from a place of authority, and sometimes those people are in Black Lives Matter robes. And if you're speaking to me from that place, I'm immediately going to react to who are you talking to? Which is how I grew up in the south side of Chicago. Who are you talking to? You don't speak to me that way.
Mhm.
You don't address me that way. The other point and that's my own stuff. That's my own way of living in a world of people who've learned to educate very harshly or to guide very with such force. The other piece of it that you touched on to me was this piece of these black people are asking you, or these people of color are asking you to step up as a white person in certain ways. And this also is about there is no uniformity. So there are different peoples of color are going to ask you different things
Mhm.
and are going to present different things, just like different people in white bodies ask me different things. If I try to monolith you, it is going to make me crazy. I
Right.
have to go with the lesson in the moment that's being presented. I can't go with, but the other white people told me this day. Well, those white people are not this white person. So if I'm going to monolith like that, it is going to be a much more rigorous lesson. So
Yes.
we have to take everything in its moment.
Exactly. I have that written down, the monolith piece. That was one of the teachings. I was like,
Okay.
I remember that often, like, oh, Ty, yes, no monolith.
Hmm.
Very helpful.
Right.
And normal that we'd seek that when we're kind of trying to figure this all out, and especially people, white people who in particular who don't have a lot of contact with people of color, which
Hmm.
greatly has changed in my life. But when the contact is very narrow, you just kind of grab onto whatever you can, and
Right.
there's less of this sense of, oh my god, there's so many ways to hold this and so many views. And yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. It's that's another timely piece that you just named is I'm dealing with a lot of Bay Area folks who have had a lot of contact with
Hmm.
other peoples of color and other black people. And one of the things even this week that I'm recognizing that I've had to say a few times is, do you know I'm not that black person that you spoke to? Do you know that I've had a totally different route? So I understand that you're wanting to make blackness something that you can hold and you don't want it to be this sort of unwieldy thing, but that's what it is.
Hmm.
That's what whiteness is. That's what blackness is. That's what womanhood is, manhood. They're not something that I can just say, this is man, this is a man, this is a woman, this is a black, this is a white. There are so many different things. And that's the flexibility I'm realizing that I'm constantly being asked to be in. How
Hmm.
do I how do I take the useful bits of what I've learned from a black experience, for instance, or a white experience? And then when something new comes in, how do I fold that in? Like in the cake batter when I'm forming, folding in the egg whites, I do that delicately because I want the
Uh-huh.
airiness of that in the cake. So I can't just mix it quickly. I have to fold it
Hmm.
very delicately. No more mixer at that point. That's what I think we're all needing to learn when we talk about these monoliths. You don't make everything one thing quickly. You have to take it all as a separate ingredient.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I'm going to skip around in terms of chronology because you're bringing up what to me links to trauma and how we respond. And I
Hmm.
know you've done some deep dives lately that kind of have opened your perception of kind of evolutionarily where we are as humanity and what we're needing to grow or heal.
Right.
Do you want to talk about that? In terms of
Help
that
me more
reactive,
specifically.
well, part of that getting everything small and being reactive is
Hmm.
can be part of a trauma response, right? Where we're not
Absolutely.
able to let go of the beater at high speed, right?
Hmm.
So, there's something about the nervous system there, and it seems like you've been exploring something about that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's sort this whole COVID period has I mean, I didn't realize until I would say maybe May that I had been in that mixer reality most of my life, even though I've been doing deep dives into trauma and all of this psychoanalysis work and all kinds of healing modalities, that I've been in this mixer reality, which is what I feel we all are urged to get into. Uh, and certainly in this, that I've used Western civilization a few times today, this Western civilized way of being. It's about your purpose, your ascent, and somehow we're always concerned with how we're going to ascend, where we're going to ascend to, whether it's while we're here or whether when we're leaving this planet, how are we ascending?
Mm.
And so it just creates this frenetic uh, piece, this frenetic way of engaging in life. And once COVID hit and I was forcibly stopped, that what I call Mother Earth's way of slowing me down is by saying just might be stopping and not doing the same ways. It had me realize that my system was so active that I was always so hyper vigilant, ready for everything. What I've developed as my wounded person way of engaging is this verbal eloquence or this way of defending in a way that quickly shoots down anything that is disturbing to me. And when I'm just sitting alone for months, I realize what are you doing? Why are you reacting this way all the time?
Mm.
What's happening? And I realized it was all because of my wound. It was all because of the way that I've gone through this life. It was because my defense that I was given since my family's line was education, that this is the way that you will get out of basically slave, the post slave trauma that all of my family members were in. This was their path.
Mhm.
And and so I've been using this way of enacting this wound of that I'm going to be the scarcity is just a step away,
Mhm.
which I think is the whole wound of Western civilization. So yes, it has been so much about um, fear of loss, fear of being diminished, fear. So much of it has been the activation. And after I sat for a couple of months, and in my neighborhood, I live in Oakland, um, there were protests, and one happened to come down one day down the street that I live, and I realized, having come down for several months, that when they came through, my limbic system was once again being activated. And this was something that I concurred with what they were saying. But
Mm.
still, I thought, I can't bear this. I
Mm.
can't bear this energy that is so much about um, keeping me riled up.
Mhm.
I realize I don't want to be riled up. There's a place of tenderness that I wanted to sit in, that I had been more sitting in than I ever had in my entire life, uh, that I didn't want to be activated into, even though philosophically I agreed with what these people were saying as they were coming down the street with their banners and yelling and all of that. But my limbic system just says, no more.
Mm.
Um, this is not the way you want to approach. This is not the way you best approach anything. And I have realized on so many fronts in my life that to approach in such an argumentative way for me is not ideal.
Mm,
It doesn't, I can't get to my compassion from there for others or even self compassion. The only thing that I can do is defend and to be what I'm going to call a scholarly warrior in some way is what I've become. And it's interesting that it was never, we've looked at warriors, and even as we look at these police and their whole way, we look at it in such a more, the brutality in such a more physicalized way. What I realize is that, oh no, it's inculcated in me and in us in other ways where
mhm,
I'm fighting all the time. And I just realized I can't fight.
mhm,
This is making my quality of life so poor. We
mhm,
must stop fighting. And then that's when I tied it back to Mother Earth. I'm like, oh, this is what you're doing. You're
mhm,
stopping us.
mhm,
You're making us just be with a few people. Uh, because all of the stimulus keeps us so activated. I've broadened it out beyond me, but just sticking with me, that's just what I learned.
mhm,
Uh, And what I realized in all the work that we've done with the people we've named, Maladoma, Sobonfu, the others I've worked with, so much of that ritual is about slowing things down. And I hadn't held it that way. I was still trying to learn the ritual so that I could be the shaman Maladoma was trying to tell me we could be. I was still doing the Western civilization ascent thing. It
mhm,
wasn't until this that I realized, oh, I'm doing these rituals and I'm doing these prayers to slow down,
mhm.
not to quicken the mixer. Um, So I hope I got touched on what you were asking.
Definitely. I mean, the next step from there is like, okay, so if I'm not going to be this warrior, I'm not going to be in this intense limbic kind of state of arousal,
Mhm,
and there's so much needed, so much change needed, and
mhm,
it feels very urgent.
mhm.
So, what have you discovered about ways to engage that aren't from that place?
Well, so much of this whole period is either subtly or and sometimes like a slap in the face, moving me back to my creative self.
Hmm.
So even when I described my current role to you, I almost described it in the way that we describe leadership roles. And I realized I don't want to do that because I'm not trying to put myself yet again in another role of leading and
Mm,
and ascending somehow, moving something in some powerfully aggressive way or assertive way. So it has been so much for me about this return to how does your creative being function. So there's a part of my life that is as a theater artist, and and what I've been pointed back to several times is the joy that I had
mm,
being a theater artist. And people often comment on this way that I articulate or my way of being verbally eloquent. And what I always have to say to people is that that had everything to do with theater.
mm,
That's how I learned all of that. It had nothing to do with the Ivy League school that I went to. I was this way before I went to that school. I spoke to them this way in the interview. This was theater that gave me this. This was, or I lived in Ashland, Oregon for a while in high school. This was those people that helped me. It was those theater artists that I saw, that I emulated. And I felt, wow, that's wondrous what they're doing up there
mm,
as they shifted from role to role to role,
mm,
as they brought me the nuances of a different reality each time. And I realized even then, that's what I want to do. And it wasn't what I want to do as a profession, because there are other things that come with being a theater artist that I didn't want. And certainly my family didn't want because they wanted me to survive. So for them, that wasn't the notion. But what they taught me how to do is how to how to shift role when I needed to, how to know that I had the expansive role at any point, that I wasn't limited to anything. That's what those theater artists
Mm.
in Ashland, Oregon showed me, that I could be any sex, any race, any sexuality, any culture. I could, and so that's one of going back to appropriation. That's another way that it doesn't sit well for me, because I know as a theater artist, that is how we grow. That is how we show others. If you actually see someone else and honor them by taking on everything they do in a way that is and make it aesthetically beautiful, then you've done something good.
Mm.
That's what those artists did. And that's what I've always wanted to do. That's what is I'm being pointed back to. This um, approaching the world and people, beings in the world, with a breath of language, with a breath of nuance, with really listening and seeing them and saying, oh, I see how you're communicating with me, and pairing with that communication. That's what is shifting for me. And that takes me out of this pressure that I have to do something in a certain way. When I just sit with someone, or even you, for instance, and just say, how is she being with me? And then I pair to that somehow. I start to engage with that somehow. That's when we start to create together and have wondrous times together. But when I stay in my role as tiger, as scholarly warrior, or professional, blah 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 blah, leader in this way, that possibility is not there. So that's what I'm being pointed back to, this more creative orientation, and I'm calling it creative because I don't have the other word in my consciousness right now, but it is something in the realm of transformation. It's something in the realm of honoring the life form that's outside of you. It's because I even see it if we're with an animal, that you're not trying to be something, you're just being with it. You're just going to its vibration, its rhythm. You don't make it do your things, as I see some people with these leashes and these dogs and things, you're trying to force it to do something. The times that are best is when you're letting it be what it fully is, and you're being who you are. That's what's happening in this shift. And it is not easy, because we go out in the world and there we are in the matrix again. And once in the matrix, we start doing what everyone else is doing. So this time alone for me has been invaluable, because I get to really sit in this thing that I am, that I learned when I was in high school. This, when I watch those actors on the Elizabethan stage or on the Angus Bulmer stage, that's what I learned.
Mm.
That's what is I'm taking me back to. That's your ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
Why? They taught me how to be an ambassador. And I've gone into being a leader when they taught me how to be an ambassador as a young high school kid.
I'm just like soaking it in. There's so much beauty in what you're describing. And I can just
Hmm.
feel it as you speak. Like my body feels more alive as you speak. And there's such a relational quality to it, and this shape shifting fluidity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also just hearing it as your gifts were shown to you in that moment. Like, oh, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that always touches me. I just love when
Mm-hmm.
we're able to come back and recognize
Mm-hmm.
when we've been shown this is who you are.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's taken me 40 friggin' years to get back to it. But yes, they showed me this is who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what COVID isolation has given me the opportunity to return to.
Hmm.
This is who you are.
Hmm.
Be that.
Hmm.
And then I'm simply folding the egg whites into the cake again. I'm not trying to beat everything to happen quickly to get it into the oven and out before I have to go to my next event. I'm just folding it in.
And it sounds like the orientation shifts from being against things to becoming like a source of something that things move through and are birthed into the world. I don't know if that fits, but that's how
That
it sounds.
fits perfectly. I mean, I think birthing has been one of the key metaphors or recognitions of what we're always doing. When any two of us come together, we're creating something, gestating something, and then birthing it.
Mm.
That's what we're doing together. And if I think of it that way, when I sit down with someone, or as I'm sitting here with you, even over this technological medium, that's what we're doing. We're
Mm.
creating something. It's got a gestate for a bit, forever how long we give it, and we're birthing something
Right.
into the world.
Mhm. It's nice to take a breath when it feels needed.
Hmm.
Just
We
to,
don't do that enough.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah, it feels like I'm feeling grateful to you in this moment because I've not articulated what I just articulated to you, even to the forefront of my own consciousness, like
Mhm.
I just did, and
Mhm.
honored those shapeshifter actors that showed me at 16 this is what's possible. And I'm just appreciative to you to remind me of that.
Mm. I hesitated, but I think I'll name it, which is when you talk about it, I also feel, and maybe you could just call it Eros, but almost erotic. And I wonder
Mhm.
if there's something for you there. Like just when you speak about it, there's this quality that shows up.
Mm. That's lovely how you say that. And of course, I don't know that there's ever not the eros or the erotic in what brings me joy in this life with almost all the individuals that I engage with. It's so scary for many. Uh, I find because we so much shame has been introduced into us in and around eros and the erotic. Yet, as I was talking about theater to someone recently, and I made that juxtaposition that, in a theater world, there's hardly any sensual, sexual thing we don't play with.
Mhm.
So on the stage, we're doing, the thing we're supposed to do. We're doing the job. But when we're off that stage, I mean, we're always being what most of the world calls inappropriate. That's what we play in. And yes, of course, everyone goes a little further than some go a little further than they need to, like a Harvey Weinstein, let's say. But in the arena of that world, yes, I think there's no way to be creative in the way that I've just described. Uh, Without bringing in Eros. There's
Mhm.
just no, that's the creativity and that energy is the same. So when I talk about it, that's what comes into me.
Mm.
This way in which, in many ways, with an audience, we are having sex.
Mm.
That is what we're doing. That we're
Mm.
like, see this world and see it as beauty. We are seducing them
Mhm.
into something to to have an escape, to have a to have a joyful escape. That's the whole point of the world. So yes, that's a huge part of the energy that is there, of the creative energy that's there. It is erotic. It
Mm.
is eros. It is all
You
of that.
you wear it so
Yeah.
well.
What's that?
I said you wear it well.
Thank you. Thank you. As you're having me remember who I am, I think it can't help but come into me so fully. So
Uh-huh.
thank you for that too.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I
Mm.
think we should go to Ashland when we can again
Mm.
and be in that world. It was yeah.
Mhm.
When I think of my utopia, I think of a world where we can all do that all the time, where we can engage with each other like that all the time in some beautiful, colorful, costumed reality. Everyone can be whatever kind of beauty they want to be, whenever, and change it whenever they want to change it. That would be my utopia.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's part of this birthing is to, again, to not only be resisting, but to be imagining. So
Hmm.
what is your utopia, right? To let
Hmm.
yourself feel the flesh of that, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Absolutely. And I believe the wounded powers that be keep us in some sort of resisting consciousness.
Mhm.
And there is a fear. If we were imagining too much, we would no longer be tethered to
Mhm.
their vision. And so there is a concerted effort to keep us resistant and in a resisting mode. What Mother Earth, at least how I see it, is providing us with this whole isolation, quarantine, is start to imagine again.
Mhm.
Um, and I connected to that. I've been using the term cocoon as I describe what's happening and the imaginal cells that we all are, that we're sort of decomposing like those caterpillars do.
Mhm.
And whatever is happening in that period, which I'm told are the imaginal cells that become active. This is what the metamorphosis for me is about. And an answer to your that question that you asked, this is what's happening. This decomposition, the imaginal cells taking life again, and us coming into whatever form of a butterfly we are to come into,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
which includes the erotic.
How could it not? Creation, right? Yeah.
Yes, creation, exactly. And this is what I feel, getting back to your initial thing, the ancestors are here to say, yes, that's what you're doing. You're
Mhm.
not just struggling and fighting, you're also imagining, you're also creating. And ask us, and we will help you. But
Right.
if you think that you're only fighting and struggling and toiling, then we have to let you play the game as you play the game. But as you seemingly want to play the game. But if you're wanting to have the full breadth of what's possible,
Mhm.
then imagine. Because everything that you imagine is possible.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's what I hear the ancestors saying to me.
Mm. In this moment, or is that something you've been hearing as a theme?
Well, as I said, this whole period, as you're
Oh,
asking me
period.
about this shift um, from that I must achieve, I must ascend, I must be something that is laudable. What's happened as I am decomposing or quarantining or whatever we're calling it, that's when, as I've heard in any spiritual conversations I've had all this life, is that you cannot hear the divine until you shut up, until you stop. And that's what's happened. I couldn't hear as long as I was busy, 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 moving to the next thing, talking to the next people, trying to be what I thought they wanted me to be. It wasn't until I just stopped that I could actually hear. So yes, it has been of late more so, even though I started those prayers long before, really I didn't stop to get a response until March 16th, 2020, when
Mm.
I was forced to leave my job and be home every day after that on my own.
Big teaching. Yeah. I'm going to take a little risk here. We can cut this part if we want to, but I just want to. So I've been tracking something that showed up in my own nervous system, and since this is what we're facing in the world, might as well open it up.
Mhm.
And so that moment when you said, yeah, and some people take it a little too far, like Harvey Weinstein, right? And the female rage of like a little too far. What do you mean a little too far, right? But so then that and it's so violent, really. Like the image is just it wants to strangle someone, right? It's
Mhm.
so quick and it's so filled with rage.
Mhm.
And then there's the freeze. There's such so much in the somatic experience of these wounds, that collective wounds that live in us, right?
Uh-huh.
So anyway, because you and I both have training in this somatic reality, we can track it and watch it and breathe and
Mhm.
notice, and we don't have to be fully taken if we're lucky. But just because this is what we're exploring, I thought it might as well be super real and just share that And yeah, not sure if I have any question or point except to be in the reality of what we're facing, and how we're, yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. And the part of me that is Black in this culture, and when I hear someone, I mean, of course, I've heard in my life that Texans have said that slavery was just teaching in the textbooks. It was just a really difficult internship, like a difficult intern. And that same sort of reaction comes up in me.
Uh-huh.
And the thing that occurs to me to say to that is, and so that I understand that, and the part of me that's male and not feeling that kind of a fear about Harvey Weinstein forcing me into something or raping me, there is a certain dissociation I have from probably the piece that came up in you
Mm.
with that. As I imagine white people have a dissociation when we're talking about the vestiges of slavery, or what gets us riled, what gets a person like me that's holding Blackness riled up. But what came up is this morning as I woke up, I was reading something called the ketamine papers for the study group that I'm in. And there's one of the psychoanalysts that did a lot of work in Mexico, and he a part of the work unearthed this statue that they, when the Spanish came and basically decided that most of the native spiritual practices were bestial and savage and needed to be stamped out, and they needed to foist their religion onto them. There was a deity, and I'm not necessarily going to pronounce this way, but I think it's Coatlicue. So yeah, Coatlicue, and but it's not a language that I know, so I could be pronouncing it improperly. But Coatlicue is a goddess basically that has a head of two serpents. So when that energy came up, I felt the energy of the serpent,
Mm.
which I have been very familiar with of late in myself, and how it also attaches to what you spoke to, that both that erotic part, but there's another part, and that's what Coatlicue is. It relates to Eros and it relates to violence.
Mm.
Um, and so when this therapist was doing his work in Mexico, he would have people do whatever plant substance he had them using. And he would put a violent film on one wall and some sort of erotic film on another wall. And then they would have their ceremonial process.
Wow.
So I was just reading about, so when you said that, that's what came up for me. That
Mm.
so much of this existence is both of those things, is
Wow.
Coatlicue. That that's what we're living in. That is what it is. Harvey Weinstein is about that. So many Harvey Weinsteins are about that. Um, I think it is one of the ways, speaking of all of the action, all of the theater, cinematic, all of the performers like me, the thespians, it's the duality of what we're living, both violence and incredible erotic or eros. It's all that happening at once. That's what we're synthesizing and bringing out.
Wow.
That's the role. So in many ways, we're all serpents in some way. We're all like that. The vilified serpent that was vilified there for her, the vilified serpent um, in the Bible. That's what we are. We
Mm.
are transformative serpents. So when that energy, when you just depicted that energy, that's what I felt first. Like, the serpent comes alive, like how, that's untenable. And that is, and one of those serpents, it is untenable. And then there's the love erotic serpent that's like, well, let's see what this brings.
Right.
So Coatlicue is both of those things
Mm,
and happening. And so I realized today I need to look up this goddess and see what, because I felt such resonance. And then when you said what you said, it came back again like, look up that goddess.
right. Wow, that was an unexpected place for that to go. I love what you brought. Yeah, I'm glad I took the risk. It feels like that's a really important message.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it is. And so much of I was in one of my own ceremonial pieces recently, deep meditation. And I've been, as you, if you know some of this, I've been so righteously angry with my parents and their domestically violent way of being as I grew up. And when I was in this deep meditation, I felt my parents who are deceased speaking to me. Much like I said, I opened now to hear the ancestors. I could hear them. And what I heard my mother saying is, baby, you know, we are people that came through violence, don't you? This is what this particular plane in life is about. We came through violence. So we, of course, are going to enact through violence. And you are of our lineage. So you had to see and know this. You had to understand it before it was for long in your maturation period. You needed to understand this earlier. And I was amazed with all of the work that I have done that I had never thought of that perspective. And I certainly think that I think about everything and I think about the different ways. I had never thought
Mm.
that, oh, maybe this was necessary in my growth process for me to understand. And the last thing I heard her say is that, you know, you're about big transformation in this life. There's no big transformation that doesn't happen without violence. And that's what comes up
Mm.
when you just said and enacted what you enacted, that those of us who are about big transformation, we also have to know violence.
Mm.
That's what Coatlicue is telling us. You
Mm.
have any big birth involves violence.
Violence.
Mhm.
Yeah. There's such a, I mean, that there's such a continuum of what that could look like. But
Well, there is.
yeah.
And that's what I feel we all have different gauges of what we feel is tolerable.
Hmm.
And it's a huge continuum.
Yeah.
In my particular life, it was substantively violent.
Yeah.
And I have been clenched in anger about it until I was in this meditation. And I thought, and she basically just said, release that. Just you can't move yourself if you're holding so much rage towards us for having been so violent. You
Mm.
can't let in the nurturing that's there for you. And the minute I did that, so much nurturing poured into me.
Mm.
The minute I let go, and it's like, oh, maybe I needed to know that, or I
Mm.
needed to learn that on some level. Then I opened and the nurturing flowed in.
That's beautiful.
So,
Yeah.
why these things happen? Are they going to make us angry a lot of the time? Mhm. Um, and we're learning. When I say we, I mean all of us, no matter what we're calling our identities. We're
Mm.
learning. This is the game.
This is the game.
This is the game.
Yeah, so we're almost at time, but I just want to just broaden this last piece a little bit. So you're talking about the violence, your lineage coming through this particular, right?
Hmm.
And then from our conversations maybe a month ago or something, you were talking about just the human experience period and what this plane is about. Can you just say a little bit about?
Well, in this moment, it's similar. That this plane is about. It's a physical plane. You know, so I feel that what my learnings have told me, and going back to that snake piece or that serpent piece, is that this is a opportunity to try to bring together, and I think of it as an intricate tango, an Argentine tango, the etheric and the primal. That's what this is about, and those two don't naturally come
Mm,
together.
mm,
I feel that in this plane, this earthly plane, that that's what we're attempting to do.
mm,
We're attempting. That's this work that we're talking about, as we process it and go through all of the things we go through spiritually, emotionally, physically, culturally, all of it is about trying to do this intricate dance with these things that don't easily come together. Um, where I believe before we incarnate, we're in something that is, as I said, etheric. So where it's a very different way of organizing around things and creating things. And who knows, there may be some form of violence there, but the form of violence that we know is this primal, earthly violence, whether it's the animals in the forest, the plants taking over other plants and the root system, whatever it is, it's violent. That's what I feel this plane, that what we decided when whatever our soul contracts, that we want to get this, we want to do this synthesis, this particular alchemy. And I think we are doing a very complex alchemy, is what I feel all of us are doing. And we've chosen these genders and race and sexualities and all of these things in order to make it give us the fodder to do that work.
There's no shortage of that. Yeah.
You're right. There's no shortage of that. And I believe if that's the way that it came about, what a fascinating creation that we're in.
Yeah.
It's just, as I said, those astronauts told me, don't get stuck in the role. Realize that you can always come out of the role and take a breath before you go back into the role. Come out, drink some water, wipe the sweat off, get a massage, then go back. That's not what we've been doing. We've been going straight through, and it burns us out to do it that way. It's exhausting. The artists are saying to me, model for them taking the break.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, that feels like a very full, rich place to stop. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so great to just have a concentrated time to dive in with you. And I think this will be just really wonderful for a lot of people to hear. So I'm really grateful.
It was fun to do it. Thank you for asking me. Before these things, I never understand why I'm being asked to like, what do I have to say? And then, of course, I have lots to say. So much of that has to do with the trust we've developed. And so I say whatever comes up without trying to sound good. I just say, this is what is coming up. So thank you for being one of those beings in my life.
Thank you. Okay, 1 second. I'm ending the recording.